I didn't think I was lovable when I came in. I know better now. Life couldn't be better. I'm okay. And there's a serenity that comes with abstinence. I just wish that everyone could have it.
Food Addiction is a podcast which explores the disease of food addiction and presents the solution. We interview professionals and counselors who specialize in the disease of food addiction, and we interview individuals who have successfully recovered from food addiction and discuss how they did it. Esther Helga Goodman-Stotier was motivated to change careers after she recovered from food addiction by opening a food addiction treatment center and the InFact School, the world's first and only sugar and food addiction counseling training, which offers a recognized certification. Check out the website for more information on obtaining this certification, as well as proven recovery programs at infactschool.com. Listen to these episodes as we discuss the problem and the solution around food addiction. I'm Susan Branscome, and I am a recovered food addict and the host of this podcast, Food Addiction, the Problem and the Solution. You heard in the intro to the podcast, we host professionals as well as people who have recovered from the disease of food addiction. Today, my guest on the podcast is DC, a recovered food addict. Welcome to the podcast, Dee.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Yeah. We're going to dive into some questions. During these podcast recordings with our recovered food addicts, we talk about what it was like before you recovered, how you did it, the ahas you had in recovery. I'm going to relate some of my experience if I think it would be helpful to the listeners, and what it was like, and give our listeners some hope that there is a solution to our disease. So let's start by talking about where you're from. Where did you grow up? A little bit more about you.
Okay, well, I am a native Connecticut-born person. I was born in, 1940.
Okay.
And I was the daughter of immigrants, number 2 out of 7, but the oldest girl, so I started being a caretaker early in my life. We were poor, but I didn't know that. Nobody told me. I had good food. I had a good home. I always was well dressed. Went to a parochial school, so I had all of the things that I needed to grow up. And
sure. Where did your parents immigrate from?
From the Madeira Islands. It was, they did a good job with us. I didn't always think that when I was growing up, but certainly looking back, I can see the sacrifices they made for us. And we've all prospered and we've all thrived, and life is good.
It sounds like your childhood was, a good one. You said you were poor, but you didn't know it. And what was childhood and teenage? What were those years like around your food and weight?
I was not born a compulsive overeater. I know many people say they are, but I wasn't. Growing up in the 40s, it was during the war and sugar was rationed. So I wasn't, eating a lot of sweets or things like that. I always had good, solid, healthy food. And I can remember as a child wishing I could have some of that mushy white stuff, but my parents bought good whole grain things. And I look back now and think that's why I'm so healthy today, because of the way I ate then. I didn't have a weight problem. And then in high school, I joined together with a group of girls, and we were all short, 5'2", 5'1", and I was the fat one in the group. But I weighed 115 pounds. So was I fat? No. But in my head, I sure was. And so I started dieting in high school, trying to get down to the 100 pounds that all of my friends are. And my body was not built that way. I will never, ever be 100 pounds. But I started a dieting history, and I managed to diet my way from 115 pounds up to 215 pounds before I found the 12-step rooms.
Yeah.
So through high school,
Yeah.
I dieted. Through college, I dieted, and always carried maybe 10 pounds more than I should have. But it wasn't anything that made me obese or drastically overweight. But my head was always telling me that I was too fat, that I needed to lose weight. And I tried a lot of things.
Yeah, we'll go into that. I want to ask you about your teenage years. Those were similar to my teenage years. My friends were all thinner than I was. They didn't seem to struggle with their weight. They just ate what they wanted to, and they were thin. And I had a more muscly, athletic body. And I remember thinking 10 pounds doesn't sound like very much, but when you're in high school, it's a lot, and there's a lot of pressure, especially back then. And when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, to be thin, to be very thin and not have any extra weight. So you talked about the mushy white stuff. What was that?
The white bread.
Oh, okay. White bread.
Yeah. I had the whole wheat, the rye, all of those good, healthy grains. And you talked about what it was like growing up then. When I was in college, I had a good friend, and she was called to the nurse's office, and she was told she would not get her teaching certificate unless she lost weight. And she tried and she couldn't, so she dropped out of college because of it. And weight was just a big issue back then. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was even like for that story. And then airline attendants, were expected to be at a certain weight or they couldn't work. I mean, there's a lot of pressure to be thin during our childhood. So we're going to talk about dieting, and you said you dieted your way up to 200 plus pounds, and we'll talk about that. When did you really realize that you had a preoccupation with food and weight, and it wasn't typical or normal? Is that your teenage years?
I didn't know it then, but yes. As I said, I was constantly dieting, and I had two modes. I was either in diet mode or I was in binge mode. I had no in between. And because I was so busy and active after college, teaching, traveling, grad school, I never really put on a lot of weight. It was always manageable, but I was always aware that it was very, very easy for me to gain weight. And if I lost 10 pounds, my life was good. And if I gained 10 pounds, my life was horrible.
Right.
And so, it was a fixation. I hadn't thought of it in that way, Susan, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, the food takes up such space in our heads, and I was the same way. I was either on a diet or I was off a diet, and if I wasn't on a diet, I was thinking about the next one that was going to cure this problem I had with weight and my obsession with food. So I relate to what you're saying there. Talk about the dieting and the trigger foods and sugar. You identify as a food addict, is that right?
Oh my gosh, for sure. If I don't eat something, I don't want it. But the minute I put some food into my mouth, sugar, carbs, grains, I want more, and I can't stop. I have no stop button. If I don't start, I'm okay. But once I start, I can't stop. And so that was, nobody ever told me that I had an addiction. And, I did so many things and spent thousands of dollars, but nobody ever said, once you stop this, it's all coming back. And
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, food addicts, as we talk about, Esther Helga has talked about this and other professionals, it is a brain disease, and not everybody that's obese is a food addict. But with addicts, we, just like with food, we ingest it and we have to have more. And then we become obsessed with having more. And sugar was like that for me. And we'll talk about recovery, but until I got fully abstinent from sugar and trigger foods, I couldn't really recover. So, talk about the diet experience, what that was like. Did you use, assume you used commercial programs like I did
Yeah,
and
yeah,
diet pills?
yeah. And I did pills for a while. I went to a doctor, and honestly, in my 20s, early 30s, it wasn't a major problem. I got pregnant, and in 1969, I was pregnant, gained 8 pounds during the pregnancy, and delivered a set of twins.
Mm,
So I came out of the pregnancy thinner than I started, which was unbelievable. And that first year, I didn't gain any weight. Because I was just so tired and so busy with 2 little babies. My husband was an airline pilot, so he was gone a great deal of the time. So I had the 2 children to take care of. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't out a lot. I wasn't teaching. I wasn't going to school. I wasn't traveling. And that's when I started eating more and more and more. And that's
mhm.
also when I started with the diet programs. I tried, can I say the name of,
Yeah, you can say the names.
yeah,
Yeah,
I tried Weight Watchers, which just didn't work for me. It gave me too much leeway. And I'm a person who can't have that leeway. Um, I tried Diet Center. I tried women's weight loss. I went to a doctor, and I did it all. I did it all. Spent thousands and thousands of dollars. So my girls were born in 1969, and 5 years later, when I got pregnant again, I was up to 175 pounds,
right. You're
which
only five. You said 5'1".
5'2". Well, that's today. I used to be 5'2" and a half. Yeah,
Yeah, I know. We
half.
do shrink.
Yeah. So I really, I mean, and I was not a happy fat person. It
Yeah,
was my ego took a nosedive. I can remember meeting an old boyfriend from college, and he wasn't sure it was me, and I denied it was me because I didn't want him to know what I had become.
mm,
I can remember going into a store that we frequented often, and the owner asked me when the baby was due, and I
oh,
wasn't pregnant.
yeah,
Yeah, my ego just took a tremendous, tremendous nosedive. And after that second pregnancy, the weight didn't come off. And
right,
I got up to, I think, 187. And that's, started all of the rounds of every possible Nutrisystem. I tried them all, and
yeah,
they worked until they didn't work because
right,
nobody told me that this was going to be my life, that I was not a person who could eat normally, that I had an addiction.
right.
And so once I stopped doing a program, all of the weight would come back on. Yeah.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I would lose and gain 50, 60 pounds. I was really good at dieting. I did it for 43 years. And the thing about these commercial programs is they don't tell you how to maintain. It's not a good business plan for them because they really want you to come back and when you gain the weight back. But we are not normal eaters as food addicts. And, once we ingest sugar or trigger foods or I was a volume eater, my weight went up to 203 pounds. And, I've kept 70 pounds off. And we're going to talk about how you kept the amount of weight you've kept off and how you did it. But there's a lot of shame that you're referring to
Absolutely.
around carrying extra weight. And it sounds like you have an accomplished career in teaching and so forth. And it's like I could do all of these other things really well, but it's not something I could do is keep weight off. And there's just the shame about it. Talk about that.
Yeah, with the shame, it just brought to mind just an incident. When I was a stay-at-home mom for 18 years, and then when I went back to work, I worked in domestic violence as a victim advocate.
Okay.
And I will never forget the woman who came in who had been abused and beaten by her boyfriend. And she said to me, "It's okay, I'm fat, and he doesn't like me fat." So
Oh.
she was okay with the abuse. And that just broke my heart because I could relate to that. I could relate to the fact that we had so much shame around what we were and that we never felt we were enough or good enough. And I certainly felt all of those things. And I ended up becoming not a very nice person, pushy, argumentative, all of those things. As I said earlier, my husband was an airline pilot. I could fly anywhere on that line for free, and I wouldn't do it because I didn't want anybody to know that this is what his wife looked like.
Oh,
So
wow.
the shame was overwhelming. And honestly, looking back at it, I don't know how I survived it as well as I did. Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of times we use food to manage our emotions. We are addicted physically, but often we use it to manage anger, fear, resentment, right? And that's what I did. And you were talking about the agitation and that you weren't nice. I think for me, I could not control my weight. And so that made me so agitated and irritable. And I didn't know why. I just hadn't found the right diet, and it was just demoralizing. But as it turns out, as you know, we are different. We need a different structure and accountability. And we'll get into that. So that's what you're talking about. What we know that... addiction, like food addiction, it can be one of several or one of a couple of addictions. Alcoholism, I'm a recovered alcoholic. You were talking about smoking, and there's science around food addiction being a brain disease. And we have addict type brains, right? When we like something, we like it a lot, and we can become obsessive about things, right? So talk about that.
Yeah. Oh boy. Oh boy. Yes, I certainly drank too much. And that started in college. And when you say we can become addicted to anything, I had a daughter who smoked, and every time I got into her car, I said, "Oh, this smells horrible." And one day she got into my car and she sniffed and said, "What is that smell?" And the back seat was covered with gum wrappers because I was up to like 4 or 5 packs of gum. And eventually I put the gum down. You give it to me, I can become addicted to it.
Right.
I don't know if you can, I have books. I'm addicted to books. I'm addicted to shopping. Most of it manageable these days, but my brain is an addict's brain. And, I love one of the people who goes to our meeting will say, has said, what are you addicted to? And his answer is, "What do you got?" And that's me. Yeah. What do you got? You know what? I can become addicted to anything. And for me, there's no in between. I either have to stop it or know that it's going to continue out of control. But honestly, becoming addicted to gum, oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I was too, and I still chew it. I told my person I talked to about how much I was eating, and my jaw hurt, sorbitol, all of that. So I can have 4 pieces a day. And that's my limit, and that's my agreement. And so I have 2 at lunch and 2 at dinner after dinner. So I've managed to have some abstinence around gum, but gosh, give me something that I like, and I'm gonna probably get addicted to it in some way. And that's the way our brains work, right? So talk about your bottom. Where was your bottom? What was that like?
Oh, wow. My bottom. It was 1985. I had 3 girls by then. I would get up in the morning, have breakfast with them, send them off to school, and sit at the kitchen table with a book and snacks. And I would eat and eat until they came home for lunch. I'd have lunch with them, send them back to school, and I would stretch out on the couch in a stupor from all of the food.
Right.
They'd come home from school, I'd have a snack with them. And after supper, I would send them to bed early. And because my husband was away so much, that was my eating time. And I would eat until bedtime. And then it would start all over. And one day I was stretched out on the couch with the television on, and it was a local program, and there were some people with their backs to the camera, and they told about being in a 12-step program. And I was desperate. I was totally, totally desperate. And they told about being in a 12-step program. I found out where it was locally, and the first time I drove to that meeting, waited in the parking lot, and nobody came. And I was so relieved that nobody came because I was petrified. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I did find a local 12-step meeting for food issues, and started going to that. And it really, really didn't work. But anyway, I was trying it. We were going to Amsterdam in December, and I decided I had to lose weight so that I could button my winter coat. And so I started to be a little bit more serious about it, but never abstinent, never really abstinent. And when we came back from that trip, I knew I had to do it. It was that or stay at 215 pounds for the rest of my life. That was my bottom. Yeah.
The bottom, the bottom is, and I want to talk about your bottom, but it's almost like, okay, you're just eating so much. And then many of us eat in isolation, in secret. We don't want people to know, how much we're eating. Of course, we wear this disease. You can't get away with this disease because many times we are, morbidly obese, and the secret, there's power in the secret, right? So it just sounds to me like, you knew when you watched the TV program that you were not eating normally, that you just had reached a point where you didn't want to live like that. Am I right?
Oh my, you are so right. I was just, my life on the outside looked great. I had everything, a beautiful family, a beautiful home. But inside, I was totally, totally miserable. And with I can tell you the day I started my journey to abstinence. My husband and I had gone out to a restaurant with some neighbors. It was a new restaurant. They didn't have a liquor license. So they brought a free bottle of liquor to the table. And I took a drink. And the more I drank, the more I ate. And when that meal was over, I realized just how sick I was. And I sent my husband home with a neighbor, and I drove to a 12-step meeting, and I totally, totally broke down. It was the first time in my entire life that I ever told anybody what I was really doing with the food. And that was the day that I admitted that I was powerless, that I just
Yeah.
couldn't control it anymore.
Right. That's when, we spend a lot of time in denial. It's not that bad. I can lose this weight. I just need to find the next right diet. But there comes a point with everybody that recovers, I think, that reaches a bottom and says, I don't want to live like this anymore. I am not able to do this on my own. I would like to do it on my own, but you have talked about this. You didn't get it right away. You went in, you met with them, and you just weren't honest at the beginning. But eventually, you had that like real bottom where you said, "Hey, I'm ready to do whatever you guys tell me to do." Right?
That was it exactly. For me, being able to do it myself and being in control had always been so important to me. I am a strong woman. I can do it by myself. I don't need your help. And to finally admit that I couldn't do it by myself was probably the most important thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, I would agree with that in my case too. That we get to live. We get to live. So, talk about when you became abstinent from the food and the compulsive overeating and the addiction, and we talk about the solution. So, abstinence, the solution. What did you do to start recovery?
Yeah, the first 12-step program I came into just didn't work for me, but I heard about an offshoot of that 12-step program.
Hmm.
And that's the one where I finally got abstinent. And I can remember that night so vividly, where I left the restaurant, went to a meeting, told them what I was doing and who I was. And they guided me and they said, the first thing you have to do is call your sponsor and tell her what you have been doing. Because I had been lying to her. I would call and say, no, it was a good day, when actually I had picked up the food or had binged or whatever. And I finally knew that I was going to have to get honest. So I called her that morning, and that morning was January 4th, 1986.
Mm.
And I called her that morning and I said, I have been lying to you. I have been cheating. I just can't do this anymore. And she agreed that she would continue to sponsor me as long as I was honest with her.
Yeah.
And yeah.
We have to be honest. We have to tell on ourselves, and when we do that, we're doing it with people who are also addicted to food and have issues with food, and they're never surprised, right? So we have to get honest, and we have to admit this, because the denial is powerful. We don't want to lose the food because it's so important to us, when we're in it, when we're addicted to it. Um, so talk about your recovery. What we
Yeah,
talk about not doing. Yeah, go ahead.
one of the things you just mentioned was that we are doing it with people who understand. All of the commercial programs I had been in before really didn't understand food addiction. They were not a support, they were salespeople and
Hmm.
didn't understand. So when I came into the 12-step program and realized that these people, were people who knew who I was. I didn't have to say anything other than I'm a food addict, and they got it. And it was that knowledge, knowing that they had been through it, that they had been successful, that made me want to continue.
Right, we're not normal eaters, and if you think about Weight Watchers and Nutrisystem, Jenny Craig, all of them, if you are not a food addict and you know that you have weight to lose, theoretically you can go in, do the diet, lose weight, and then watch what you're eating and keep the weight off. But that's not how we're wired, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And I had never been able to stay successful. I could
yeah,
be successful for a little while, but I couldn't stay successful.
right.
And that's the difference between those programs and what I found in the 12-step rooms, the
Sure.
acknowledgement that I was an addict. and that it
Yeah.
was not a moral issue, and that I didn't need willpower. It wasn't about willpower at all. If I
Right.
had willpower, I wouldn't have to do this.
Right. We could have done it. 43 years of experimenting on my part, is just, why can't I do this? And it's not about willpower. If it was, you and I would have lost weight and kept it off and not have to, not have to have gone through recovery. But let's talk about your recovery. We talk about not doing this forever. When I thought about not eating sugar ever again in my life, I couldn't wrap my head around it. So, but I do this just for today. So what do you do every day to stay recovered?
Oh my, that's a big question. First of all, I write my food down for the day. And after I've written it, I call my sponsor and commit it to her. And if I need to make food changes, I call her back or call another 12-step person who's qualified, so that it's not my plan.
Right.
Once
It's
I've
not
written
your,
it
yeah.
down, I've turned
It's
it
not
over
your
to
food.
my
Hmm.
sponsor,
Right.
and it's hers.
Right.
And then for the rest of the day, I eat 3 weighed and measured meals a day, nothing in between but coffee, tea, or diet soda, and that's it. And I've said, I get up in the morning, I brush my teeth, I weigh and measure my 3 meals. It's
Yeah.
become part of my routine. And the amazing part, Susan, is that once I got some abstinent time under my belt, all of the cravings went away because
Right.
I wasn't putting my drug of choice into my body. And
Yeah.
I don't crave things. I can go to parties, I can go to buffets. It's not mine. And
Right.
because it's not mine, I'm okay with not having it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I do the same thing. I commit my food every day to someone, and I read and write every day on recovery. I make sure I work in prayer and meditation. I assume you do that, but I weigh and measure
Absolutely.
everything. Yeah, I'm sure you do that because not only do we have to do the what you're talking about as food addicts, but we also have to get to what we talk about as the causes and conditions of why we were eating, and that's the emotional and mental recovery. Talk about what that's been like for you.
um, Emotionally, I'm happy with myself. I
Good.
wasn't happy with myself 37 years ago.
Right.
I'm peaceful. Um, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight. It took time. As soon as I got my 90 days, and in my program, once you have 90 days, you're eligible to do service. My sponsor threw me out there and said, "You will do service."
Yeah.
And she said, "You will go." I can remember when I started before my abstinence date. Um, she wanted me to go to at least 3 meetings a week, and I said, "I can't do that. I lead a busy, busy life."
Mm.
Well, once I admitted that I was powerless, somehow I found time to go to 5 meetings a week. And at those meetings, there were qualification meetings where there would be speakers. There were also 12-step meetings. And she said, "You will start the steps." And she didn't push me into it. She gave me time to adjust to living a new kind of life,
Hmm.
and then gradually led me into doing the steps. And as I said, she threw me out into doing service because I think that's an essential part of the 12-step work. And
Hmm.
so going to meetings, doing service, and I've done it on all levels, from the local meeting to the world service meetings. And it's also kept me in the middle of the herd. That's a phrase we like to use.
Hmm.
So that so that I always have my 12-step program and my 12-step friends around me.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And emotionally, the other thing, I share with my 12-step friends things that I don't share with my civilian friends, because 12-steppers get me. They know I'm an addict. They know how I react to things. And that was a big thing for me emotionally, because I kept a lot of things secret and a lot of things hidden.
Yeah.
So emotionally, I started to be able to admit to people that I wasn't perfect, but these were the things that were going wrong in my life, and many of them due to my own fault. So,
Right. Yeah. As food addicts, we use food to manage our emotions often, and it works temporarily. Whether it's fear or anger, we use food, and with recovery, we use the program of recovery to help us deal with what comes up in our lives. And like you said, when you're like me, when you dieted and lost weight, life would be perfect. And life is never perfect, no matter how thin we are, no matter how healthy we are physically, life is not perfect. And we need to find a way, a manageable way to deal with it. Right. And that's recovery. So, food has a lot of, when I first became abstinent from food and sugar and other trigger foods, there was a releasing of the toxicity of the food from my system. And it took me a while to become what we call neutral to food, the neutrality, like you say. And people have told me, Susan, that's no longer our food. You go to a baby shower, you're not going to eat the cake. Everybody else is eating the cake. Why can't you just have one bite? So we find that we have neutrality to food, right?
Absolutely. And it's funny that you said that. I have a baby shower this week, and I have a party this week. And I know the party will be lots of drinking and lots of food. And I'm just going to go to enjoy the company. And for me,
Yeah.
that's enough. I'm going to eat my dinner before I go to the party.
Yeah. And some of these cakes are beautiful, aren't they? They're just, they're beautiful. It's not our food.
No, it's not mine. It's not mine. And I'm okay with that. And my family, of course, has gotten used to it. And
sure,
most of them support me. And I have had a younger brother who would try to take something off of my food plate, and I would hit his hand and say,
no,
it's all I'm going to get today, and you can't have any
right.
of it.
People and dogs cannot have our food now. This is our food. We're going to eat every bite, right?
Oh, yes, and I have a dog who's a compulsive overeater, so she understands fully that I'm not going to give her anything from the table. She can only eat what's in her dish.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, just so many things. But for me, I think the most important thing that has helped me is staying in the middle of the herd, working the 12 steps, doing an AWOL, which is a program called A Way of Life, where we go through the steps, and my idea of my higher power has changed too.
How so?
I grew up with a higher power that was punishing, and that it was you do this or you're a bad girl. You do this or you're a bad person. And that's not what I believe any longer. Being in the rooms have taught me that God is a gentle, kind God. And that's been a big transformation for me. And I think for me, the major difference is I am no longer religious, but I am spiritual.
Yeah.
The religion confined me and kept me feeling that I wasn't enough. Spirituality means that I have a higher power that I can pray to, that I know is there for me and is not there to punish me, but to take care of me.
Right. Yeah, the 12 steps hold out the possibility that a higher power may or may not be a god. I grew up with a religion that said if I was a good girl, I would be okay, but if I did anything bad, I would be, that I was bad or that God would punish me. The same thing. I know now that I could not have recovered from my addiction on my own. Now, what is that higher power? I don't know that I can say I know for sure, but I do know that there is a spirit, there is something out there looking out for me, and maybe it's my higher instinct, maybe it's the group, maybe it's just I don't know what it is, but there are too many miracles out there to believe that there's not something,
Yeah.
right?
And, the first time I went through the steps, my fourth step inventory was incredible. It's where we take a fearless moral inventory of our lives. Well, everything that was wrong in my life was because of somebody else. My husband was terrible. My daughter's teachers were terrible. My neighbors were terrible. None of it was my fault. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then with each successive fourth step inventory I did, I peeled some of those layers of the onion away and said, whoops, maybe this one was my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe my husband's not a bad person.
Right.
And, I had to do many fourth step inventories.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of people who have been on my list for all of those because there's, you know what, I think when I do my final fourth step inventory, my sister-in-law will probably still be there.
Uh-oh.
But I also try to pray for her and
Yeah.
and wish
That's
her
what
the
we
best.
do.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
talk about what your life is like now. How, I mean, how different it is that you're in recovery from food addiction. I mean, and to me, talk about yours, but I never imagined that any of this was possible.
I never not only did I never imagine that it was possible, I never imagined that I could do it for this amount of time. I have 37 years of abstinence.
Congratulations.
To me, that it's not my doing. It's
right.
The program, the group, my higher power. But it's amazing to me when I first came into the 12-step rooms. I was going to stay till I lost the weight. And then I lost 95 pounds in the first year. And it was just shy of a year. And I said, well, I might as well stay around for the year anniversary. And it just kept on going and kept on going. And my life changed drastically because I felt differently about myself. I went back to school in abstinence, got another degree, started a new career in abstinence, and did so many of the things that I hadn't done or hadn't enjoyed doing. I've always been a traveler. But for me, traveling was about the food, the drink, the partying. And in abstinence, I learned to enjoy a country and its people for who they were. And I've traveled extensively. And, I always have extra food with me. So if I can't get what I need, I have it with me. Life is totally different. When I retired, I volunteered for 13 years teaching ESL, and
English second language.
Yeah, and that just brought me to a different place. And I did that for 13 years, and then my husband became ill, and I stopped, and because he just needed a lot of my time and a lot of my attention. And then when he passed away, and I just shared this at a meeting the other day, we knew that death was coming. And in my refrigerator, I had a weighed and measured lunch ready, a weighed and measured dinner already. And when the nurse came in and said, "This is coming soon," I said, "I'm going to finish my dinner and then I will come in." And that, to somebody who doesn't understand my addiction, that sounds crazy. But I have had to learn to take care of myself first. I have to put my needs first. And if
Right.
I had gotten into the food, I wouldn't have been there for anyone else. So
Yeah.
my husband has been gone for 5 years. I miss him terribly, but I
I'm
love
sorry.
him. But I love living alone. And I
Yeah.
just love living alone. I never have had the opportunity to do that before. I eat what I want, when I want, where I want.
Yeah.
And I'm very,
I just hear a lot of serenity in the abstinence, and you can do anything abstinent, right? We know that you can go through the death of a loved one, illness, anything abstinently. We don't have to go to food. So, yeah, 37 years of abstinence, and you've kept off a 100-pound, essentially a 100-pound weight loss, right?
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And of course, my body has changed tremendously since
Yes.
then. But you know what? I do yoga once a week. I do an exercise class a week. I walk my dog. I'm active. I'm secretary of the condo association. Membership chair for the Friends of the Library group. I'm 82 years old. And
82. Yeah.
I attribute this to my 12-step body. That
Yeah.
for all of these years, my weighing and measuring of my food, by eliminating all of those things that were triggers for me,
Right.
I've been able to stay healthy. And
Yeah. You
yeah,
take the chatter of the food and weight out of your head when you do this, right?
absolutely.
And Dee, so as we wrap up here, congratulations on 37 years. I know you talked about giving credit to others and the people in the program and your higher power, but almost 100-pound weight loss, weight release, as we say, after 37 years, and you didn't think you could do it a day at a time. But if anyone is listening that might be a food addict, thinks he or she might be a food addict or compulsive overeater, what kind of message would you give to them? What would you say?
Well, I know that I was a down and dirty food addict. I mean,
Yeah.
I really, really was. And if I could do it when I believed there was no answer for me, that there was no solution, I know that it is possible. And I just wish that everyone could find what I have. That I, 37 years. If I just had gained 5 pounds a year, which I used to be able to do in a weekend,
Oh
I,
yeah.
I don't know where yes, I do know. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. It's not an easy thing to do. It's hard work at the beginning, but once you get it, life becomes easy, life becomes better, and I would not trade. I would not trade this for anything. My psychiatrist said to me one day, "There's only one thing wrong with 12-step programs." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he said, "You have to be an addict." Because he felt everybody should be in a 12-step program.
it would it would make my life a lot easier if everybody in my life was at a 12-step program.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
there is a solution. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah,
There is a
absolutely.
solution,
There is.
and
And
you can be 82 years old and be healthy and happy. And for many years we didn't know that was possible, right?
absolutely. When I tell you I was a miserable, miserable person, and, most of it was, I thought, self inflicted. I thought it was my fault. And once I learned it was an addiction and not a moral issue, and that changed the whole thing for me.
Hmm.
And to get the support, I have had incredible sponsors in my program,
Yeah.
women who have guided and led me and loved me.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I was lovable when I came in.
Yeah.
I know better now. Life is good. Life couldn't be better. I'm okay. And, as I can see the light at the end of the tunnel coming closer
Yeah.
and closer, that's okay too. That's okay
Yeah.
too. And there's a serenity that comes with abstinence. That is just amazing. And I
Hmm.
just wish that everyone could have it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's freedom. There's just freedom and serenity, peace, groundedness in being abstinent and living this life. I was slowly killing myself with food, and we don't have to do that any longer. But it is about self-love. I hear that's what you're saying. Not only, a higher power, you're talking about the spirituality, but we learn to love ourselves. We haven't always been taught to do that.
Yeah. And I know in some of the 12-step rooms, we say we will love you until you can learn to love yourself. And
Yes.
I think that's what happened. My
Yeah.
sponsors never gave up on me. They worked with me. And
Right.
I owe so, so much to those women who led the way for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Dee, thank you for joining me on the podcast today, Food Addiction. It's been great, and I know that the listeners will get a lot out of your share. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you for making this so easy for me.
This is the Food Addiction Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the podcast and learned more about this disease. We hope you will rate and write a review on this podcast and share it with others. If you or someone you know is suffering from the disease of food addiction, there is a solution. The various food addiction recovery programs are available and listed on the website, theinfactschool.com. Or if you would like to know more about how to get certified in treating food addiction, the school is accepting applications now for its next training beginning in September 2023. Go to theinfactschool.com. That's INFACT school.com to learn more.